The 1980s were a defining decade for pop culture, particularly when it came to the rise of heartthrobs, who captured the hearts and imaginations of fans around the globe. These actors and musicians weren't just famous, they became cultural icons and the ultimate crushes for countless women.
I'd like to try the orgasm, please.
How many would you like?
But now, after 40 years, one might wonder, how have these iconic heartthrobs aged? Have they managed to maintain that same magnetic appeal that once made them stars?
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, it's getting harder. It's getting harder. It's getting tougher. Every day gets tougher.
In this video, we will take you on a journey to discover how today's realities compare to the nostalgic fantasies of yesteryear, showcasing the most iconic heartthrobs of the 80s and revealing what they look like now. Matt Dillon in Rumblefish, 1983. And in 2025, Richard Grieco in Booker, 1989. And this is what Richard looks like in 2025. Billy Warlock in Baywatch, 1989. And nowadays, Rob Lowe in The Outsiders, 1983. And Rob 42 years later. Patrick Duffy in Dallas, 1981. And this is what the actor looks like now. Tom Cruise in Cocktail, 1988. And in 2025. Michael Biehn in Aliens, 1986. And nowadays, Christian Slater in Gleaming the Cube, 1989. And Christian in 2025. Andrew McCarthy in Weekend at Bernie's, 1989. And in 2025. Johnny Depp in A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. And 41 years later. Mickey Rourke in 1985. And 40 years later. Tom Selleck in Magnum, 1982. And this is what the actor looks like in 2025. Robert Downey Jr. in Chances Are, 1989. And in 2025. Matthew Broderick in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986. And 39 years later. John Cusack in Say Anything, 1989. And nowadays. Richard Gere in Breathless, 1983. And Richard in 2025. Charlie Sheen in Wall Street, 1987. And this is what Charlie looks like in 2025. Don Johnson in Miami Vice, 1984. And nowadays, James Spader, 1989. And 36 years later. Pierce Brosnan in Remington Steele, 1982. And 43 years later. Ricky Schroeder in Silver Spoons, 1987. And 38 years later. Tony Danza in Who's the Boss, 1984. And in 2025. Denzel Washington in The Mighty Quinn, 1989. And this is what the actor looks like in 2025. Judd Nelson in The Breakfast Club, 1985. And nowadays, Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, 1985. And 40 years later. John Stamos in Full House, 1987. And John in 2025. Patrick Dempsey in Some Girls, 1988. And 37 years later. Keanu Reeves in The Prince of Pennsylvania, 1988. And Keanu in 2025. Ralph Macchio in The Karate Kid, 1984. And Ralph in 2025. C. Thomas Howell in The Outsiders, 1983. And 42 years later. Bruce Willis in Moonlighting, 1985. And 40 years later. David Hasselhoff in Baywatch, 1989. And David in 2025. John Cryer in Dudes, 1987. And 38 years later. Blair Underwood in L.A. Law, 1988. And Blair in 2025. Jason Patrick in The Lost Boys, 1987. And nowadays, Willie Ames in Charles in Charge, 1984. And in 2025. Eric Stoltz in Some Kind of Wonderful, 1987. And Eric in 2025. Christopher Atkins in The Blue Lagoon, 1980. And 45 years later. Kurt Russell in Tequila Sunrise, 1988. And in 2025. Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon, 1987. And nowadays, Dustin Nguyen in 21 Jump Street, 1987. And Dustin in 2025. That's it. If you liked the video, click like and subscribe. See you later.